February 16, 1945. Dawn breaks over the vast Pacific, the horizon a blur of steel and mist. On the deck of the USS Enterprise, sailors scurry, securing lines, checking engines, and adjusting flight gear. The salty tang of the sea mixes with the sharp smell of aviation fuel. Aircraft carriers stretch like floating cities, decks bristling with B-25 bombers, their wings gleaming faintly in the early light. Pilots stand in formation, faces tense under helmets, eyes scanning the endless blue. Today is no ordinary mission. Their target lies hundreds of miles away, Tokyo, heart of the Japanese Empire. Intelligence suggests the city is lightly defended from seaborne attack, but no one knows how the Japanese will react. Every decision, every second counts. A signal flashes. Engines roar to life. The first bombers inch forward, catapulted into the sky, carriers vibrating beneath them. Below, sailors hold their breath, aware that this audacious strike could reshape the war. For the pilots, it is a leap into uncertainty over a city that has never been attacked from the sea. The fate of the mission, and its impact on both nations, hangs in the balance. The dawn sky over the Pacific is alive with anticipation. What unfolds next will shock Japan and redefine the very idea of naval warfare. By late 1944, the Pacific War had reached a critical stage. American forces had advanced steadily through the island-hopping campaign, capturing strategic points like Saipan, Guam, and the Philippines. Each conquest brought U.S. naval and air forces closer to Japan's home islands. But the Japanese mainland remained largely untouched, protected by geography, fortifications, and the belief that enemy attacks from the sea were unlikely. Tokyo, Japan's political and industrial heart, was considered secure against naval aviation. The Imperial Navy and Army focused their defenses on expected approaches: land-based bombers, coastal artillery, and fighter aircraft patrols. Radar installations were limited, and early warning systems were concentrated along major military ports, not expecting carriers to venture so close to the mainland undetected. For Japanese planners, an attack from the Pacific by medium bombers launched from aircraft carriers seemed improbable, almost unthinkable. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy had been refining carrier-based strike operations for years. Lessons from the Doolittle Raid in April 1942 had proven the feasibility of launching land attacks from the sea, but operational limitations, aircraft range, carrier fuel capacity, and pilot endurance had made such missions high-risk endeavors. Yet the audacity of striking Tokyo from carriers promised both tactical and psychological payoff. Strategists understood that a successful strike could demonstrate American reach, weaken Japanese morale, and force a redistribution of defensive resources. The carriers assigned to the mission, Enterprise, Hornet, and their accompanying task force, were meticulously prepared. The 25 Mitchell bombers, traditionally land-based, had been modified for naval operations. Crewmen worked tirelessly to adjust catapults, secure planes, and ensure engines were optimized for takeoff from the limited deck space. Pilots underwent intensive briefings, studying flight paths, Japanese defensive positions, and emergency procedures for ditching in the open ocean, if necessary. Every detail was calculated. Navigation charts accounted for tides, currents, and prevailing winds. Timing was critical. Dawn offered light for visual targeting while still maintaining the element of surprise. Fuel calculations left minimal margin for error, forcing precise coordination between aircraft, carriers, and reconnaissance units. In essence, the operation was a high-stakes orchestration of technology, human skill, and daring, a complex ballet played out over hundreds of miles of open water. The Japanese, confident in their homeland security, could not imagine such a bold maneuver. Coastal observers saw carriers hundreds of miles away and assumed routine exercises. Pilots training over nearby islands prepared for conventional land-based raids, unaware that the American Navy was about to redefine the rules of naval aviation. As dawn approached over the Pacific, the stage was set. The audacity of the mission, the precision of preparation, and the vulnerability of Tokyo converged, creating a moment in which innovation, courage, and strategy would collide in the skies above Japan. Japanese defenses in early 1945 were formidable, but also misdirected. Coastal artillery and fighter patrols focused on anticipated threats. Enemy fleets approaching major ports, submarines infiltrating shipping lanes, and air raids from distant bases. The Imperial Army assumed that any bomber threat would come from land-based aircraft stationed on the home islands or nearby occupied territories. Few anticipated a carrier-launched strike hundreds of miles from the coast, and those who did dismissed it as logistically impossible. On the American side, naval intelligence had studied Japanese radar coverage, patrol routines, and air response times. Reconnaissance flights identified gaps and vulnerabilities in Tokyo's defensive perimeter. U.S. planners understood that surprise was essential. Even the most powerful bombers would be at risk if detected too early. Every detail of the mission, from timing and formation to fuel management and bombing altitude, was meticulously rehearsed. Pilots memorized navigational waypoints, studied photographic intelligence, and simulated approaches to the target city. The carriers themselves were marvels of naval engineering. Each vessel functioned as a floating airbase, capable of launching and recovering bombers in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Deck crews coordinated in precise choreography. Planes were fueled, bombs secured, and launch sequences timed to the second. Pilots braced for a launch that combined extreme skill with raw courage. A miscalculation in takeoff, navigation, or fuel management could mean disaster in the open sea, hundreds of miles from friendly territory. The psychological aspect was equally critical. American commanders understood the impact a successful strike would have on Japanese morale. A raid on Tokyo by carrier-based bombers would shatter assumptions of security, demonstrating that no city was beyond reach. It would force Japanese leaders to divert fighter aircraft, redeploy anti-aircraft defenses, and reconsider the vulnerability of the home islands, a strategic ripple effect beyond the physical destruction of bombs. Meanwhile, Tokyo's citizens and military personnel were largely unaware of the looming threat. The idea that medium bombers could be launched from carriers, fly hundreds of miles, and strike with precision was beyond conventional imagination. Coastal observers saw nothing unusual on the horizon. Fighters remained in training, and anti-aircraft crews focused on routine drills. As the carriers closed the distance under the cover of darkness and early morning mist, every element of the mission had to align perfectly. The stakes were immense. Technological innovation, meticulous planning, and human bravery were converging on a single objective. In a few hours, Tokyo would face a reality no one on either side had fully anticipated. The success of the Tokyo carrier strike depended on the men who would execute it. Pilots stood on the decks of the USS Enterprise and Hornet, their eyes scanning the horizon as dawn light crept across the Pacific. The B-25 Mitchell bombers were unfamiliar to many, modified for carrier launches and their pilots. Success depended on seamless integration between naval and air units. Carriers provided navigation, fueling, and recovery support, while pilots executed tactical objectives with precision. This combination of planning, coordination, and adaptive execution transformed a risky endeavor into a viable operation capable of striking the Japanese homeland. The B-25 Mitchell bomber, adapted for carrier use, exemplified technological ingenuity. Modifications included weight reduction, catapult launch compatibility, and reinforced landing gear to survive short carrier decks. Navigation instruments were calibrated for long, overwater flights, and communication systems allowed pilots to coordinate in real time despite radio interference and distance. Carriers themselves were technological marvels, floating airfields with catapults, elevators, and repair facilities. The synergy between vessel engineering and aircraft innovation enabled what had once seemed impossible, launching medium bombers hundreds of miles from land and striking a major enemy city. Japanese defenses, though formidable, had not anticipated such innovation. Radar stations were positioned to detect conventional approaches, not high altitude, carrier-launched aircraft emerging hundreds of miles offshore. The audacity of combining human skill with technological adaptation created a strategic surprise that would leave lasting effects. The Japanese military had established a network of coastal defenses, anti-aircraft batteries, and fighter squadrons to protect the mainland. However, their focus was on conventional threats: land-based bombers, routine reconnaissance flights, and attacks along predictable shipping routes. The idea that American bombers could launch from carriers hundreds of miles offshore and strike Tokyo directly was considered highly improbable. This miscalculation created a strategic vulnerability. Radar installations were sparse, observation posts relied on line-of-sight detection, and fighter patrols were concentrated around known approaches. When the strike unfolded, Japanese defenders were caught off guard. Confusion reigned as radar operators scrambled to identify incoming aircraft, while anti-aircraft crews attempted to locate and engage bombers already over the city. The element of surprise magnified the operation's effectiveness far beyond its physical impact. Admirals and mission planners bore immense responsibility. The decision to strike Tokyo required balancing risk and reward. Launching from carriers involved extreme hazards: long overwater flights, limited fuel reserves, and potential loss of aircraft and crews. Yet commanders recognized the strategic and psychological payoff. Careful planning emphasized redundancy, contingency options, and precise coordination. Leaders had to ensure that deck operations, navigation, and timing aligned perfectly. Their foresight extended to pilot training, logistical support, and intelligence assessment of Japanese defenses. The success of the mission was a direct result of decisive leadership married to meticulous planning, demonstrating the critical role of command in high-risk operations. For American forces, the operation reinforced confidence, morale, and faith in innovation. Pilots understood the audacity of their mission and the importance of precise execution. Crews and sailors witnessed the result of coordinated risk-taking, a powerful validation of preparation and courage. For the Japanese, the raid was shocking. The suddenness of the attack, combined with the realization that their capital was vulnerable to naval air power, created psychological disruption. Defensive doctrines were questioned, troop morale faltered, and leaders faced urgent decisions to reassess homeland security. The raid demonstrated that warfare was no longer confined to conventional expectations. Audacity and surprise could reshape strategic thinking instantly. February 16, 1945. The carriers glided silently across the Pacific, dawn's first light breaking over steel decks. On the USS Enterprise and Hornet, the B-25 Mitchells were lined up, engines rumbling, catapults ready. Pilots gripped controls, hearts pounding, aware that every second, every maneuver could determine life or death. At 0645 hours, the first signal was given. One by one, bombers roared down the flight deck, catapulted into the sky, wings trembling as they climbed into the low morning sun. Behind them, sailors watched with a mix of hope and apprehension. Hundreds of miles separated the fleet from friendly territory, and Japanese radar could detect the bombers at any moment. Flying in tight formations, the crews navigated over the open Pacific. The ocean stretched endlessly below, deceptively calm, while clouds and mist provided concealment. Pilots relied on meticulous navigation, visual checkpoints, and synchronized timing to reach Tokyo without early detection. The strike demanded flawless execution. Deviation from the plan could result in fuel exhaustion, disorientation, or interception by enemy fighters. As the bombers approached Japan, coastal radar stations detected the incoming aircraft, too late for organized interception. Fighters scrambled, but confusion and surprise delayed engagement. Anti-aircraft batteries tracked shadows in the morning light, firing frantically, yet many shells fell short or wide. The bombers descended over the city in precise patterns, opening bomb bays and releasing payloads over industrial districts, military installations, and transportation hubs. From the air, Tokyo appeared vast and vulnerable. Smoke rose from earlier raids, but the city's defenses were unprepared for this mode of attack. Pilots later described the surreal moment of releasing bombs over a city whose defenses had seemed impenetrable, realizing that planning, courage, and audacity had brought them to this pivotal moment. Below, chaos erupted. Civilians and workers fled streets as explosions shattered buildings. Factories halted production. Rail lines were disrupted. The psychological effect was immediate. The Japanese had never expected a naval airstrike of such magnitude. Observers on nearby islands confirmed that the American bombers had emerged from the Pacific, striking a target previously considered unreachable. The mission's initial success hinged on perfect coordination, navigation, and timing, a testament to the integration of human skill, technology, and leadership. The raid had crossed the line between audacity and execution, producing not just physical damage, but a profound strategic shock. The stage was set for the aftermath, evaluations, responses, and the broader consequences that would ripple through the Pacific War. As the B-25s completed their bombing runs over Tokyo, the full scale of the operation became clear. The city, densely packed with factories, rail yards, and administrative buildings, bore the mark of precision strikes. Fires spread rapidly, smoke rising in thick plumes visible even from high-altitude formations. Pilots maintained formation, observing the destruction below, while ensuring that navigation toward recovery carriers remained precise. Fuel margins were perilously low, and any deviation could mean disaster over the open ocean. Japanese defenses scrambled in response. Fighter aircraft attempted interceptions, but disorganization and delayed coordination reduced their effectiveness. Anti-aircraft gunners fired bursts at incoming bombers, yet many shells exploded harmlessly over city rooftops. Communications failures compounded the confusion. Radar, defensive thinking, and highlighted the growing dominance of U.S. naval aviation in the Pacific theater. The aftermath would reveal both the physical devastation inflicted and the profound strategic and psychological consequences of this bold, unprecedented operation. The immediate consequences of the carrier strike on Tokyo were dramatic. Factories, rail yards, and administrative buildings suffered significant damage, disrupting production schedules and transportation networks. Fires ignited by bomb blasts spread quickly through the densely packed city, overwhelming emergency response efforts. Though civilian casualties were limited compared to later raids, the psychological impact was immense. Residents confronted the reality that their capital was no longer beyond enemy reach, challenging long-held assumptions of security and invulnerability. For the Japanese military, the strike revealed critical vulnerabilities. Coastal radar installations had failed to detect the incoming bombers in time to mount an organized response. Fighter squadrons had been scattered, unable to intercept effectively. Anti-aircraft batteries fired blindly, often too late to make a difference. Commanders were forced to acknowledge that Tokyo, the political and industrial heart of Japan, could be penetrated from the sea, an unsettling revelation that forced a re-evaluation of defensive deployments. American command assessed the raid with a mixture of relief and triumph. The operation had demonstrated the feasibility of long-range carrier strikes on mainland targets, validating months of meticulous planning, training, and innovation. Pilots had executed complex navigation over open water with precision, maintained formation during high-risk bombing runs, and returned safely to carriers despite minimal fuel reserves. The mission reinforced confidence in both technological adaptation and human skill. The psychological ramifications extended to American forces as well. Sailors and airmen witnessed the tangible results of audacity and meticulous coordination. The success of the raid inspired morale across the Pacific Fleet, showing that daring operations could yield strategic and symbolic victories. It became a powerful reminder that preparation, innovation, and courage could combine to produce results that reshaped the theater of war. Moreover, the raid had a ripple effect on Japanese defensive thinking. Even as Tokyo struggled to recover from physical damage, Military leaders were compelled to divert attention and resources to prevent future carrier-based incursions. Anti-aircraft batteries were repositioned, fighter patrols extended, and strategic planning reassessed. The audacity of the strike had not only caused immediate destruction, but had forced Japan to alter its strategic posture, spreading resources thinner across the home islands. The stage was set for long-term consequences, shifts in strategy, morale, and perception that would resonate throughout the final months of the Pacific War. The longer-term effects of a carrier strike on Tokyo went beyond the immediate destruction. Japanese military planners were confronted with an unsettling reality. Their homeland was vulnerable to American carrier-based air power. Coastal defenses, previously considered adequate, had proven insufficient. Fighter squadrons were redeployed, anti-aircraft batteries repositioned, and emergency protocols for civilian and industrial areas hastily revised. The raid forced a reassessment of Japan's defensive doctrine, stretching resources and attention across multiple potential threat axes. For American forces, the operation served as a proof of concept for naval aviation strategy. It demonstrated that medium bombers, launched from carriers hundreds of miles from land, could strike urban centers with precision and return safely. Lessons learned regarding navigation, fuel management, and formation discipline were codified into operational manuals, influencing subsequent raids and establishing the framework for large-scale carrier operations that would dominate the Pacific War's final year. The psychological impact was equally profound. Tokyo residents and Japanese officials faced the shattering realization that their capital was not invulnerable. Morale faltered as the expectation of homeland security was overturned, and the sense of surprise instilled caution and anxiety across military and civilian populations. Conversely, American personnel experienced a surge in confidence, seeing that careful planning, technological innovation, and audacity could achieve strategic results far beyond conventional expectations. In strategic terms, the raid accelerated the broader U.S. campaign against Japan. Subsequent operations relied increasingly on carrier-based strikes, using the lessons of timing, formation, and coordination to maximize both physical damage and psychological disruption. The Tokyo strike became a benchmark, showing that risk, when calculated and executed with precision, could produce outsized effects on enemy morale and operational planning. The operation also left an enduring legacy in military doctrine. Naval and air commanders recognized the value of flexible, long-range strike capabilities, reshaping the role of carriers in modern warfare. The integration of technological innovation, human skill, and audacity created a template for operations that could bypass expected defensive measures, altering how both offense and defense were conceptualized in the Pacific theater. The strike had not only changed Tokyo, it had reshaped the strategic landscape of the war, setting the stage for the final confrontations of the Pacific campaign. The carrier strike on Tokyo stands as a testament to the convergence of innovation, courage, and strategy in modern warfare. What made the mission remarkable was not just the physical destruction it caused, but the audacity behind it, the ability of a well-prepared, disciplined force to challenge assumptions about what was possible. Pilots, sailors, and commanders demonstrated that careful planning, human skill, and technological adaptation could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. For Japan, the raid was a profound shock. It shattered the illusion of homeland security and forced military leaders to confront vulnerabilities they had long ignored. Coastal defenses, radar networks, and fighter deployments were suddenly insufficient against a determined and unconventional enemy. The psychological impact extended beyond immediate panic. Cities, planners, and civilians alike had to reconcile with a new reality. No target was beyond reach. For the United States, the operation reinforced the power of audacity and precision. The success of carrier-launched bombers highlighted how innovation could multiply the effectiveness of a smaller force, achieving results that conventional approaches might not deliver. It became a blueprint for subsequent strikes, influencing tactics, doctrine, and the broader strategy of the Pacific War. Ultimately, The Tokyo Raid exemplifies the interplay between human resolve and technological ingenuity. It illustrates how courage, meticulous preparation, and bold decision-making can redefine the battlefield, not only through destruction, but through the reshaping of strategy, perception, and morale. The mission serves as a lasting reminder that in war, as in history, innovation coupled with audacity can leave a mark far beyond the immediate conflict, a legacy that resonates in both military thought and human understanding of courage under fire. Perfect. Here's a complete